Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Stephen King podcast. This is a bonus episode, and it is bonus episode number 22. And I have a returning guest with me this time, and that would be author Kathrin Hutson. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Lou. How are you?
Too bad. Did I say your last name wrong?
You got the letters. It's Hutson. Yeah.
Hutson. Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I got it written down wrong on my whiteboard. That's why but as soon as I said it, I said, that doesn't sound right, because I was looking at your website, and I said, no, I don't think that's right. So there you go. So okay. I've made the first mistake, so we don't have to be nervous anymore. And
your blood has been drawn.
Blood has been drawn. So you were back on the podcast back in episode 13, and that was actually last August. So it's almost been a year. How have you been doing?
Oh, I've been doing well. Gosh, so much has happened. And in all honesty, my days blend together. So It doesn't feel like a year at all by any means. But yeah, things are going well. It has been a while. How are things with you?
Oh, I can't complain. Along. I mean, yeah, it's, time marches forward, stands still for no man. It's, or person, I should say, to be all inclusive. Sorry about that.
Well done.
You can teach an old dog new tricks, eh? It's hard for us old guys.
It's working. I didn't have to say anything.
That's
you did that all on your own.
There you go. So why don't you just do a quick little reintroduction of yourself for any of our listeners who haven't caught the previous podcast. Just tell us a little about who you are and what kind of fiction that you write and anything else that you think is relevant.
Absolutely. Well, I'm Kathrin Hutson. I write dark fiction. That is where my passion lies. And predominantly I write dark fantasy, grimdark fantasy, and dystopian sci-fi, and about to branch out into dark urban fantasy as well, which will be very fun. And my latest book, which is out on May 26th, is Sleepwater Static. That's book 2 in the Blue Helix series, and this is my LGBTQ dystopian sci-fi set in the very near future, in the 2030s, and still so eerily relevant to right now. I didn't go far enough in the future, apparently, or far enough in the past. And after book 1 in that series was so well received, and had so much fun with it. Sleepwater Static is the second book, and it became an international bestseller in the first 24 hours after it released.
Oh, nice.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really, really exciting. And the series is my first branch into sci-fi, and felt like it was a good place to start with dystopian. Hopefully nobody, I know there has been some talk going around about Stephen King, having predicted or perhaps even influencing the current times with some of his own work. And I've had a few people mention the same kind of thing with mine recently. So
okay. We'll have to get into that. That's a good tease for our audience. But before we do that, I do want to cover the time period since we last talked. And so it's been a year. And I think one of the things that happened for you is you moved across the country.
Well, we had previously moved. Well, we didn't. I haven't moved since you and I talked last, but we are moving this Friday.
Oh, okay. Oh, and so you're going across the country?
Yes. Again, from Vermont to Colorado.
Wow. So that's going to be an interesting journey, and given these COVID-19 days.
It is, yes. Yes, it is.
You faced any special challenges in getting ready for your move?
Mostly it was figuring out how we wanted to, first of all, downsize, and second of all, make things safe and fast and as efficient as they could be for all of us. So we decided it was the best thing for my daughter and I to fly to Colorado, and then my husband will be towing a trailer of all of our things on the back of our truck with our 2 80-pound dogs in the back seat. And he used to move people for a living. He owned a moving company here. And so,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So he's very good at driving long distances in short amounts of time.
Oh, okay. Well, at least he has some company with the dogs.
Oh yes, he won't be alone, which is good.
Yeah.
And Colorado was actually our runner-up, our second choice, because we were supposed to have been moving to Mexico on Friday.
Oh,
Yes,
wow.
so that was particularly affected by COVID, actually, when the border closed and things fell apart.
Okay. So
all.
you're not ending up at the Sidewinder Hotel or anything like that, are you?
Not as far as I know. It's really
Okay.
impossible to predict what comes
So
next,
you're
right?
not going to be at the hotel from The Shining or anything like
I
that.
hope not.
The
No.
Stanley
Yeah.
Hotel. Yeah.
Nope. No thanks.
No. Okay. So that's well, I wish you all the best with that, and I'm sure that's going to be provide a lot of fuel for your writing. Who knows?
Right.
It'd be kind of, you're going to get like a cross country snapshot of how the whole country's dealing with this unusual time that nobody really predicted. And even though thankfully Stephen King predicted a much worse scenario with Captain Trips.
Yes.
This one, the infection rate is so much lower. But I'm wondering how you, as a writer, has it impacted you, this whole like shutdown of the economies and social distancing and that, or is it because there's like just a general sense of anxiety, I think, across the board for everybody. So some people are having trouble sleeping. A lot of people, are obviously in financial difficulties and trying to make ends meet and whatnot. So I don't know how that's played out for you.
Yeah, my family and I have been incredibly, incredibly fortunate through all of this, and we are reminded of this every day and try to stay particularly aware of it and continuously grateful for it. So I don't know, did we talk when I was on last time that I also ghost write I ghost write fiction as well as write my own stuff. Did we talk about that?
Might have. I'm not sure.
It comes up sometimes, but that has been a steady and stable opportunity for me, even through the last through all of 2020.
Right. Okay. Yes, I do remember we did talk about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And so we've been very fortunate in that way, in that I have not experienced the same kind of financial and job security difficulties that so many people are going through right now. And in some ways, in the beginning, I was worried for a while, but it turned out, that I didn't have too much to worry about. And then I started feeling bad about it.
Feeling guilty.
Yeah, there's underlying collective energy that is floating around this earth right now, and despite the fact that I am a high-level introvert and rarely leave the house anyway, and have not really experienced a change in my normal lifestyle, even through quarantine and social distancing, I am still very much aware of what other people are experiencing and how other people are feeling. And I perhaps am a bit of an empath, and maybe that's, what allows me to write such raw and real characters. But that I did struggle with that around March and April for a while, and that did affect my writing output. I was still writing every day, and there were some days where I would find myself, on my breaks going through social media and then falling apart because of everything that I see, but then eventually I got to the point where I realized that I have an opportunity with my own personal current circumstances being what they are, that I do have this opportunity to continue to write the stories that I want to write and the stories that people want to read, and maybe even, a bit of an obligation or responsibility to keep doing those things, because right now, the stories that we want to read and the hope and relationships and light and transformation are so important right now, especially in times like these, when getting into a good book is oftentimes a lot better than not getting into a good book.
Right.
So,
right.
Thinking about those things and having a few conversations with other writers helped me get out of that a little bit of a funk that I had about how do I get to keep writing like this all the time every day when the world is falling apart. And even though it's not necessarily, my own personal world, right? The world
Right.
around me outside of my bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And then I, was able to pick myself up out of it and keep going. And that's where I'm holding things right now.
Yeah, I think probably your experiences. I think for me, I haven't talked to a lot of people about it either, but I think from what you're saying, I've went through a similar cycle too. I think like March, April were probably the toughest months because that's when it was new and we were all clamping down and we didn't know how serious that was because you think, well, is this Captain Trips or is this just how bad is this going to be? And then we started hearing problems with food processing plants and you thought, well, if the food supply chain falls apart, then we're in big trouble. But that seems to have stabilized. And I think generally, people's acceptance of the situation has turned. Unfortunately, maybe it's turned a bit too much because people are obviously chomping at the bit with the nicer weather to get out and do things. And unfortunately, we're seeing spikes in cases again. But
yeah,
I know until there's a vaccine, I think there's going to be this yo-yoing going on. But I think in general, spirits are picking up again, and I think they're relaxing a little bit. Like the collective psyche of everybody is not as tightly wound as it was a couple of weeks ago. So we'll see how that plays out. And I'm curious with your second book, Sleepwater Static. When did that book launch?
That book launched on May 26th.
Wow.
Yeah, and even more so, that was another completely surreal experience, and the book launch went very well. And yes, it was, became an international bestseller in 24 hours. And all of that was wonderful. And I have loved hearing the response from readers. And at the same time, this book launched the Tuesday after. It was I think it was the Tuesday that all of the riots, or I'm sorry, the protests across the country for George Floyd were really picking up. And so I was paying a lot more attention to that than I was to the release of my book, and then went through my own sort of personal analysis of what is the best way for me to be approaching both of these things, either of these things. When Sleepwater Static, I wrote to focus on and highlight racism and discrimination and racial injustice through the continuation of the story from the first book, and so it was a very odd, sort of preemptive prescience, I suppose.
Serendipitous.
Yeah, what I had written about in this book 6 months before was happening the week of its release, and it was strange. And so that, it's still very new. Not even a month has passed yet since the Sleepwater Static has been out, but I have received some incredible feedback from it. And once again, it seems this series continues to be creepily relevant to what's happening right now.
Right.
So there's that.
So, since you threw up that softball, why don't you tell us exactly what the Blue Helix series is about?
Yes, the Blue Helix series revolves around a certain group of people, I should say, and they're spread out across the country and all over the world. People have developed an ability to elicit physical responses in people who hear them speak with a certain kind of word, and I call it the beat. They spin a beat, and it's basically like supernatural storytelling. So taking this concept of the pen being mightier than the sword, words being more powerful than action, and kind of turning it inside out and saying, well, what if words could actually do the same things, if not more effective things than physical violence or weapons?
Right.
And so in the series takes place in 2030 and 2031 so far. And not much of the United States has changed, except for
I'm sorry to hear that. No, I'm just kidding.
Right? Oh boy. I'm
sorry,
not
I couldn't
telling the
resist.
future over here. Yeah. Do not hold me accountable, Luke. Come on.
Right.
So yeah, not much of the country has changed, but we get insights into this organization called Sleepwater, and it's made of all these people with the ability to spin the beat, and they are being violently discriminated against and chased across the country. And in Sleepwater Beat, the first book, Leo Tiefler is the main character, and she is also a high-level introvert, and she has gone through a really rough childhood and finds herself sort of sucked into Sleepwater's guerrilla warfare as they're just trying to stay alive while the government and certain other private organizations hunt them down. No spoilers. And Sleepwater Static is told from the point of view of Bernadette Manney, who's a 71-year-old woman. See her first in Sleepwater Beat, and it was always my intention when I realized I wanted to actually make Blue Helix a series past book one, to write each book with a different main character, and that main character would be the main character would be a supporting character from any of the previous books. So Bernadette fascinated me, and I somehow executed successfully. I think so I've been told. Writing a story from the perspective of a 71-year-old woman who has arthritis and who takes the small chapter of Sleepwater, the people with the ability to spin the beat, down to her childhood home and this cabin in Hollywood, South Carolina, where she's from. And she has not been back home in 20 years. And she's trying to keep them safe and trying to give them a place to kind of hang out for as long as they can and rest and stop fleeing across the country in one van. And one of their members is also about to have a baby, so they have and so we see Bernadette way deeper into Bernadette's character and who she was before Sleepwater was an actual organization of people, before people with disability learned to officially come together and give themselves a name and a purpose, and how she was involved in that. And Sleepwater Static follows the same structural rhythm as Sleepwater Beat, where the chapters rotate between the present timeline and the past, when Bernadette was 19, 22, 25, 30, and then little interlude snippets of further world building, which in book one, they were news reports. And in book two, Sleepwater Static, they are letters between Bernadette and her pen pal, who later becomes a very, very close friend of Bernadette. So we're going through the past and the present and the future, and there is a lot of Black history in this book. And Bernadette was in a relationship with a Black man named Daryl, living in South Carolina, and a bit after Civil Rights era. And I don't want to give any other spoilers away, but so it's a slower paced book for sure. Just like being in the South is. And it approaches all these things. You know, when I wrote Sleepwater Beat, I was looking at marginalized communities of LGBTQ people and drug addicts and addiction survivors and the homeless and, you know, people living on the fringes of society, and realized that I had not once in Sleepwater Beat addressed race at all. And that was an oversight that I was not aware of. And when I became aware of it, that propelled me to write Sleepwater Static the way that I did. And so, you know, again, it's the same thing, using this fictional group of people with a supernatural ability that the rest of the world hates and fears in equal parts, and using them as a lens to view the actual very real, very prevalent discrimination that is still alive in the world today, and our country specifically. And and then, you know, of course, diving into these characters who have they're just so much fun, and they work so well together. And the cast in Sleepwater Static actually doubled, which was odd, but still I somehow managed to keep them all straight, which was great. So there are other people of color characters in this book, and Bernadette's partner when she was younger and the father of her child is a Black man. And I wanted to write about these things in a way that was respectful and inclusive without, you know, furthering any harmful stereotypes. And I felt that the best way to remain respectful with that was to write about these things with also, you know, acknowledging that my experience, the way I can tie myself into these things, is as a white woman. And so I was able to approach those things through a main character who is also a white woman. And I have lived in the South, as had Bernadette. And that was the way I wanted to go. I didn't want to cross over any lines for the sake of trying to make a statement, right?
Yep.
But I did write in a lot of Black characters and biracial characters. To that fit the setting and the storyline, and added so much.
Mm-hmm.
This book, which is really good.
Because that is a big thing nowadays, or and rightfully so. A lot more focus has been put on the writer's ability to write about characters and genre or classes of people and races of people that are not part of their world. And I'm just wondering if it sounds like you have some fair overlap there because you said you were from the South and whatnot. But did you have any, the term's not coming to me, but there's a group of writers or readers, like identity readers that are people are representative that are of the culture that you're writing about. Did you have any sort of input?
Yes.
Okay.
So I had multiple advanced readers and even some alpha readers. While I was writing the book, they were reading it up, but I did use a sensitivity reader, and she was absolutely phenomenal to work with. And actually, her feedback pulled out all the things that she really loved that she'd seen in the book that a lot of, at least, white writers that she had read had not done before. And she basically gave me the 2 thumbs up, all good. There wasn't anything in here that I had crossed the line with or not handled appropriately or gotten just plain wrong. So that was really great to hear.
Yes.
And also, I went into it fully open to the possibility that I very well could have,
sensitivity. Sensitivity readers. That's the term I was looking for.
They're crucial. They are so crucial, especially when writing outside our comfort zones and outside of our own personal experience. Yeah, you have to.
Very good. So Bernadette, does she have a beat?
She does, and we see it in the beginning of Sleepwater Beat. Bernadette's beat is that she can only use it on one person at a time, which is something a little more peculiar. Most people with the beat affect everyone who hears them. Bernadette's beat gets people sexually excited. That's her thing. So
interesting.
She uses it in some very interesting ways. Yeah, and it was when we meet her in Sleepwater Beat, she's just this old woman living by herself in this house that Leo is taken to with Carl. And then they all sit down to talk, and Bernadette decides to say, well, hey, look, I'm just like you. Let me show you. And then we see the scene where she's making Leo feel all these things. And I wanted to play with the dichotomy of having a 71-year-old woman and a mother and like a total badass and someone who's also like arthritic and like at the end of being able to move around freely at all, playing with that and sexuality at the same time. So there are not any sex scenes in this book where Bernadette is 70. There are plenty when she was younger, which I could identify with more, but just the fact that showing how that would evolve from someone who's 19 and ready to take on the world to someone who's 71 who already took on the world and it didn't work out the way she wanted. But she still has this ability to affect people in the same way. That hasn't changed. So
is this book a little racier than the first one then?
Not at all. No, it's not actually.
Okay.
It's
that's kind of disappointing.
Well, there are a few scenes in there, Lisa. Don't worry about it. But it's the scenes are completely different. The characters are completely different. Leo and Bernadette are they have so many similarities, and then they are so very different. But there's a lot more. Yeah, there are a few intimate scenes, which is fine, and it worked very well for the story, but a lot more of it was exploring horror and guilt and shame and reunions after abandonment and fear, and going through those more along the lines of a way that someone who has seen the world and spent far more time on it would see things, instead of Leo's running around blowing things up and getting in fights and Bernadette is running around talking to people and trying to make things work, and when they don't, she ends up spinning a beat. Things
make love, not war,
right? Or
Yeah.
I'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
Deal with yourself after this. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Does Bernadette have any children?
Uh,
Or is that too spoilery?
I guess, I mean, yeah, not too spoilery. Find out about it at the very beginning. But yes, she does. Yes.
Okay. And will they be characters in subsequent books, perhaps? Or
well, yes, definitely supporting characters in subsequent books. Absolutely.
okay.
Yes. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So I'm getting a little bit of she's like maybe a Mrs. Professor X to all these other beats.
Yeah, kind of. Only she has no idea what she's doing.
Oh, okay.
All
right. So I probably asked you in the previous podcast, but I don't recall this off the top of my head. Do you know how many books you have planned in this series, or is it just sort of open-ended?
So there will definitely absolutely be 3 at the very least, and
Okay.
I plan to have the 3rd book out by May next year if everything goes well. And then after book 3, I'm going to see what happens and feel it out when I finish writing it. So I could very well wrap up the story with 3 books, and I could also very well continue it. So that's as far as I know.
Okay. And you have a couple other series as well. Is there anything going on with them, or are they complete and you're finished with them?
So the Ginona's Children duology was just the 2 that is finished, and the Unclaimed trilogy, which is also a dark fantasy, is finished as well with the 3 books. But I am working on the first in another at least 3 book series that is super, super, super dark fantasy. My favorite, absolute favorite. And LGBTQ with queer characters as well. That is set in the same universe as the Unclaimed trilogy, and this is the Vessel Broken series. So that I'm hoping to have out before the end of the year, November. And so it takes a minor, briefly once mentioned group of people from the Unclaimed trilogy, and then the book 1 of Vessel Broken opens at the climax of the other trilogy. So we see sort of a slightly overlapping timeline, but just it goes down a completely different path, and it's much darker, but it is set in the same world. So that's the first time that I've attempted writing a different series in the same world as something I'd already created. So it's very fun to pick that apart and figure out which pieces I want to keep and which pieces I want to add, that hadn't previously existed in the world. And so that's very fun. And then the first book in this dark urban fantasy series I'm working on should be out in the next month or 2.
Oh, wow, very good.
Yes, very new. Yes, I'm still keeping it a bit secret. I'm trying to do things a little bit differently with the series, but that's also very exciting. Yeah.
All right. So you're working on the 3rd book from the Blue Helix series as well?
Yes.
Right now?
Yes.
So we got Sleepwater Beat, Sleepwater Static, and the 3rd book will be Sleepwater Symphony.
Oh, hey, it's not going to be that happy of an ending, Lou. So,
okay.
I've been toying with Sleepwater Reverb, actually.
Reverb. Okay.
Yeah. So we'll see. Who knows? Don't quote me on that. It may change, but
all right.
That's what I've been playing with.
Okay. So is there anything about that, any of your books that you want to pass on to the readers, listeners?
I will say, with the disclaimer that I don't write happy feel good stories. So, when I say dark fiction, I mean very dark, but there is an intention behind the darkness and there is a purpose for it. And every single one of my books carries the message that, is so important in my own personal life, which is that the mistakes we make and the decisions that we make, no matter how seemingly destructive and consuming and irreparable they may seem, don't define who we are, and that we shouldn't define our path moving forward by 1 or 2 or 100 bad choices because we can move past them. So there's always a vein of hope in my books, but if people are looking for something that will make them feel good on every page, I would not recommend picking up my work. Or
Right.
if you want to see what it's like to dive in, please do come join me. Come dive into the stories and see what it's like in the darkness.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And your books are available at all the usual places?
They are Apple, Barnes Noble, Kobo, Amazon, of course, and then my website as well, KathrinHutsonFiction.com.
All right. Anything else that you wanted to mention at this time that hasn't come up during the course of this interview?
I don't think so. We covered quite a lot there. That's good.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good. That means I've done my job.
Perfect.
Yes, and also means that you're very good at talking.
Well, thank you. You know, I would not have said that of myself a year and a half ago. So,
Yeah, no, you've done well.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right. I appreciate again the time, and I thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's great to come back.
Great, and I wish you all the success with your future projects and with your move. And who knows, next year you may be in Mexico if we have to do another interview.
Right. That would be fun.
Okay.
Thank you, Lou.
All right. So there you go, listeners. That was Kathrin Hutson, Hutson. So I just want to make sure that I correct my faux pas at the beginning. And it was great to have her on again. And as usual, for all my listeners, stay safe, but stay scared.